The worship of Saturn. Saturn, so active in the cosmic changes, was regarded by all mankind as the supreme god. Seneca says that Epigenes, who studied astronomy among the Chaldeans, estimates that the planet Saturn exerts the greatest influence upon all the movements of celestial bodies. On becoming a nova, it ejected filaments in all directions and the solar system became illuminated as if by 100 suns. It subsided rather quickly and retreated into faraway regions. Peoples that remembered early tragedies enacted in the sky by the heavenly bodies asserted that Jupiter drove Saturn away from its place in the sky. Before Jupiter, or Zeus, became the chief god, Saturn, also known as Cronus, occupied the celestial throne. In all ancient religions, the dominion passes from Saturn to Jupiter. In Greek mythology, Cronus is presented as the father and Zeus as his son who dethrones him. Cronus devours some of his children. After this act, Zeus overpowers his father, puts him in chains, and drives him from his royal station in the sky. In Egyptian folklore or religion, the participants of the drama are said to be Osiris Saturn, brother and husband of Isis Jupiter. The cult of Osiris and the mysteries associated with it dominated the Egyptian religion as nothing else. Every dead man or woman was in tune with observances honoring Osiris. The city of Abydos in the desert west of the Nile and northwest of Thebes was sacred to him. Sais in the delta used to commemorate the floating of Osiris's body carried by the Nile into the Mediterranean. What made Osiris so deeply ingrained in the religion's memory of the nation that his cult pervaded mythology and religion? Osiris's dominion before his murder by Seth was remembered as a time of bliss. According to the legend, Seth, Osiris's brother, killed and dismembered him, whereupon Isis, Osiris's wife, went on peregrinations to collect his dispersed members. Having gathered them and wrapped them together with swathings, she brought Osiris back to life. The memory of this event was a matter of yearly jubilation among the Egyptians. Osiris became Lord of the Neverworld, the land of the dead. A legend, a prominent part of the Osiris cycles, tells that Isis gave birth to Horus, whom she conceived from the already dead Osiris, and that Horus grew up to avenge his father by engaging Seth in mortal combat. In Egyptology, the meaning of these occurrences stand as an unresolved mystery. The myth of Osiris is too remarkable and occurs in too many different forms not to contain a considerable element of historic truth, wrote Sir Alan Gardner, the leading scholar in these fields. But what historical truth is it? Could it be of an ancient king upon whose tragic death the entire legend hinged? Wondered Gardner. But of such a king not a trace has been found before the time of the pyramid text, and in these texts Osiris is spoken of without end. There he appears as a dead god or king or judge of the dead. But who was Osiris in his life? Asked Gardner. At times he is represented to us as the vegetation which perishes in the flood water mysteriously issuing from himself. He is associated with brilliant light. After a life of studying Egyptian history and religion, Gardner confessed that he remained unaware of whom Osiris represented or memorialized. The origin of Osiris remains for me an insoluble mystery, nor could others in his field help him find the answer. The Egyptologist John Wilson wrote that it is an admission of failure that the chief cultural content of Egyptian civilization, its religion, its mythological features again and again narrated and alluded to in text and represented in statues and temple reliefs, is not understood. The astral meaning of Egyptian deities was not realized, and the cosmic events their activities represent were not thought of. The prophet Ezekiel in Babylonian exile had a vision, the likeness of man, but made of fire and amber, who lifted him by the lock of his hair and brought him to some darkened chamber where the ancients of the house of Israel with censers in their hands were worshipping idols, portrayed upon the wall around. when the angel of vision told him, "Thou shalt see greater abominations that they do." And he brought the prophet to the door of the gate of the Lord's house. And behold, there sat a woman, weeping for Tammuz. Next, he showed him also Jews in the inner court of the Lord's house, with their back toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. The worship of the sun and the planets was described by Jeremiah, a contemporary of Ezekiel. But what was this weeping for Tammuz? Tammuz was a Babylonian god, one of the months of the year, approximately coinciding with July, in the summer, was named in his honor, and by this very name it is known in the present-day Hebrew calendar. Tammuz was a god that died and was then hidden in the underworld. His death was the reason for a fast, accompanied by lamentations of the women of the land. His finding or his return to life and resurrection were the motive of the passion. Tammuz was a god of vegetation, of the flood, and of seeds. The god Tammuz came from Armenia every year in his ark in the overflowing, blessing the alluvium with new growth. In the month of Tammuz he was bound, and the liturgies speak of his having been drowned among flowers which were thrown upon him, as he sank beneath the waves of the Euphrates. The drowning of Tammuz was an occasion for wailing by women. The flood has taken Tammuz. The raging storm has brought him low. Of Tammuz it is also narrated that he was associated with brilliant light, with descent into the netherworld, visited there by Ishtar, his spouse. Tammuz's death was subsequent resurrection, or his discovery in the far reaches, but no longer brilliant, were the themes of the cult that was not just one of the mysteries, but the chief and paramount cult. The Osirian mysteries, the wailing for Tammuz, all refer to the transformation of Saturn during and following the deluge. Osiris was not a king, but the planet Saturn. Cronus of the Greeks, Tammuz of the Babylonians. The Babylonians called Saturn the star of Tammuz. After the deluge, Saturn was invisible. The sky was covered for a long time by clouds of volcanic dust, and the Egyptians cried for Osiris, and the Babylonians cried for Tammuz. Isis, Jupiter at the time, went in search for her husband, and Ishtar, also Jupiter at the early time, went into the netherworld to find her husband Tammuz. For a time Saturn disappeared, driven away by Jupiter, and when it reappeared, it no longer the same planet. It moved very slowly. The disappearance of the planet Saturn in the netherworld became the theme of many religious observances, comprising liturgies, mystery plays, lamentations, and fasts. When Osiris was seen again in the sky, though greatly diminished, the people were frenzied by the return of Osiris from death. Nevertheless, he became king of the netherworld. In the Egyptian way of seeing the celestial drama, Isis, or Jupiter, the spouse of Osiris, or Saturn, wrapped him in swathings. Osiris was known as the Swath, the way the dead came to be dressed for their journey to the world of the dead, over which Osiris reigns. Similar rites were celebrated in honor of Adonis, who died and was resurrected after a stay in the Netherland, in the mysteries of Orpheus. Sir James G. Fraser, the collector of folklore, came to regard Osiris as a vegetation god. Likewise, he saw in the Babylonian Tammuz an equivalent of the Egyptian Osiris, a vegetation god, and carried away by this concept, wrote his The Golden Ball, built around the idea of the vegetation god that dies and is resurrected the following year. A few peoples through consecutive planetary ages kept fidelity to the ancient Saturn, or Cronus, or Brahma, whose age was previous to that of Jupiter. Thus, the Scythians were called Umanmanda by the Chaldeans, people of Manda, and Manda is the name of Saturn. The Phoenicians regarded El Saturn as their chief deity. Eusebius informs us that El, a name also used in the Bible as a name for God, was the name of Saturn. In Persia, Saturn was known as Kevan or Kaivan. The different names for God in the Bible reflect the process of going through the many ages in which one planet superseded another and was again superseded by the next one in the celestial war. El was the name of Saturn, Adonis of the Syrians. The bewailed deity was also like Osiris, the planet Saturn. But in the period of the contest between the two major planets, Jupiter and Saturn, the appellative of the dual gods became Adonai, which means my lords. Then, with the victory of Jupiter, it came to be applied to him alone. You might not know it, but the entire world has been worshipping Saturn for thousands of years. The cult has never stopped, and its rites are still present to this day. Saturn, dubbed the Lord of the Rings, is the reason why I exchange rings at weddings or put halos on the heads of godly people. What do you think of that, folks? The attributes of the god Saturn and the perpetuation of his cult. All around pop culture. Since ancient times, sages gazed at the stars, admiring their heavenly glow and attributing them godly powers based on their effect on humans. Before the Great Flood, Saturn was regarded by all mankind as a supreme god and ruler of the kings. Occult researchers affirm that Saturn ruled the kingdom of Atlantis and became the divine ancestor of all earthly patriarchs and kings. The cult has been perpetuated through numerous gods during antiquity. Cronus or Saturn, Dionysus, Hyperion, Atlas, Hercules were all connected with a great Saturnian continent. They were the kings that ruled over countries on the western shores of the Mediterranean, Africa, and Spain. In Egyptian mythology, Isis is considered Saturn's eldest daughter. I am Isis, queen of this country. I was instructed by Mercury. No one can destroy the laws which I have established. I am the eldest daughter of Saturn, most ancient of the gods. United Nations headquarters meditation prayer room has a black cube or stone in the center of it. The D-Wave quantum computing cube symbolism for gateway portals. What about Pandora's box? Clive Barker's Hellraiser. The cube power, worship, and digital world creation for deception. Cloning symbolism, projection of digital world they try to create. Illuminati and Freemasonic symbolism of the black and white. Black cube of Mecca that they circle around it like Saturn rings. The Borg cube, which represents the black cube, passes by Saturn. Star Trek, The Next Generation. Borg, one hive mind. The black cube of Saturn in Santa Ana, in Manhattan, in Australia, and in Denmark. Black cube monuments everywhere, everybody. Saturn in Semitic civilizations. Semitic civilizations referred to the god Saturn as El. The supreme deity was represented by a black cube. We can find instances of the cube across the world. The hexagon, or three-dimensional cube, equals a six-pointed star as well. Many esoteric researchers affirm that the name is Israel. The combination of the names of ancient pagan deities, Isis, Ra, and El. The Greeks and the Romans also worshiped Saturn as a cruel deity. Here's a brief summary of the mythology of Saturn in the Western world. With the deposing of his father, Saturn became the ruler of the universe for untold ages, and he reigned with his sister, Ops, who also became his wife. It was prophesied that one day Saturn would lose power when one of his children would depose him. To prevent this from happening, each time Ops delivered a child, Saturn would immediately swallow it. When her sixth child, Jupiter, or Zeus, was born, Ops had him spirited away to the island of Crete. Then she wrapped a stone in his swaddling clothes. Her deception was complete when Saturn swallowed it, thinking it was the child. When Jupiter was grown, he secured the job of cup-bearer to his father, with the help of Gaia, his grandmother. Jupiter fed his father a potion that caused him to vomit up Jupiter's 5 siblings, Vesta, or Hestia, Ceres, or Demeter, Juno, or Hera, or Pluto, or Hades, and Neptune, or Poseidon. Saturn always had a negative, if not evil, significance. In ancient times, it has been called the Greater Malefic, which was opposed to Jupiter, the Greater Benefic. Right? Saturn is esoterically associated with man's limitations, restrictions, death, and decay. His Greek name was Cronus, the ruler of time, time being the main factor inevitably, leading to the death of mortals. Traditional representations of the Grim Reaper originate from the attributes of the god Saturn, who held the sickle with which he slain his father. Saturn and Satan. Saturn has also been associated with Satan, and this for numerous reasons. First, many authors argue that the word Satan is derived from the word Saturn. Second, Saturn is associated with the color black as well as Satan. Third, ancients considered Saturn to be the father's planet from the sun, the latter being associated with the principle of good. Pluto never was considered a planet. Get that through your head, folks. Saturn is consequently the celestial body that is the less exposed to the sun's divine light and thus associated with the coldness of the principle of evil. Finally, the great god Pan, the horned deity, represented Saturn in ancient paganism. This half-man, half-goat creature is considered the ancestor of our modern depictions of Satan. Pan was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his horns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. The pipes of Pan signify the natural harmony of the spheres, and the god himself is a symbol of Saturn because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. So Pan was depicted with horns due to the fact that it represented Saturn, the ruler of the house of Capricorn, which the symbol is a goat. Pan was the controlling spirit of the lower worlds. He was portrayed roaming through the forest, penis erect, drunk and lascivious, frolicking with nymphs and piping his way through the wild. We might say he ruled the lower nature of man, its animal side, not unlike Satan. Despite acknowledging its association with evil, secret societies find the veneration of Saturn necessary to obtain illumination. It is necessary counterpart of the principle of good. Masonic authors clearly associate Saturn with Satan. Saturn is the opposite to Jupiter. His symbol is the cross above the sign of Luna. He is the Satan, the tempter, or rather the tester. His function is to chastise and tame the unruly passions in the primitive man. Probably the most extreme example of a secret society worshipping Saturn's evil principle is the Fraternitas Saturni. This occult organization is based in Germany and openly embodies the hidden side of Saturn worship, the Fraternitas Saturni, or the FS. The Brotherhood of Saturn has become known to English readers through fragmentary descriptions, with emphasize the sensational, sex-magical aspects of this lodge's work, or else its darker, more satanic side. This is the understandable in light of the fact that the FS is or was the most unabashedly Luciferian organization in the modern Western occult revival, and its practice of sexual occultism, perhaps the most elaborately detailed of any such lodge. The FS represents a unique blend of astrological cosmology, neo-Gnostic demonology, sexual occultism, and Freemasonic organizational principles. This grand synthesis was originally the vision of one man, the longtime Grand Master of the SS, Gregor A. Gregorius. The great amount of symbols associated with this obscure deity only emphasize its importance in human history. The advent of the monotheistic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam confined the worship of Saturn to occult circles. As we saw here, the Lord of the Rings is still omnipresent in popular culture, but only recognized by those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Loki arrives on Earth standing upon a black hexagon. The hexagon is a subliminal 2D representation of a 3D cube, the Avengers. In geometry, a hexagon, from Greek hex or six, is a polygon with 6 edges and 6 vertices. The total of the internal angles of any hexagon is 720 degrees. Loki represents Set, Saturn, Satan, the ancient Egyptian god of evil, darkness, chaos, war, and conflict. He is seen holding a staff, which represents the war scepter. The Avengers. Hollywood, folks. The black cube represents the all-spark cube in Transformers. So many movies containing the black cube or the hexagon. Tron, X-Men, X-Men 2, Transformers, Star Wars, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, The Matrix Reloaded, Spider-Man, Total Recall. I mean, you name it. In the Austrian drama, we find that the Osar, Greek Osiris, is chopped into 13 pieces by Set. Osset, Isis, collects all of his pieces save his phallus. Horus, son of Osar and Osset, sets out to avenge the death and dismemberment of his father by confronting Set. Horus is victorious over Set, and Osar, being brought back from the dead, becomes the lord of the underworld. It is this drama that gives us the cosmic conflict between good and evil, evil being embodied by Set. This is not to say that Set was always seen as an evil character in ancient Egyptian theology. There are many times in ancient Egyptian history where conflicts between different houses led to the depreciation of one god relative to another. As in most polytheistic faiths, the characters involved differentiate themselves from the Western tradition of a devil in all that the gods are closely related. In this case, numerous historic texts suggest that Set is the uncle or brother of Horus, and in the defeat of Set, we see another separation from the norm in the devouring assimilation of Set into Horus, with the result of Horus having depictions of both the falcon head and the unknown animal head of Set. This, like Buddhism, represents a dissolution of dichotomy. Do you remember the Nintendo GameCube? Or the Xbox One with Kinect? Or X Cube, one hive mind to connect? So much cube worshipping. Dumbo truth.